Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. We're so excited that you've chosen to join us today. I have someone as my guest today. He's not a professional fisherman, but you're going to know who it is. Now, if I said Justin Martin, you think, well, who in the world is Justin Martin? Think Duck Dynasty. Martin from Duck Dynasty is going to be my guest today on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. You do not want to miss this episode. Coming right up from Duck Dynasty, Martin, right here. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, America's slowest growing podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. Today, we have got, I couldn't be any more jacked or any more stoked. I was almost late getting on the podcast today because all of my board members were calling me. All of my friends were calling me, and they were like, I cannot believe that you have got this guy on your show today, all the way from the Duck Dynasty, Commander Incorporated. We got Justin Martin here today, and you guys may know him as just Martin on the show. Man, Justin, we are so glad that you're here today. Thank you for being with us.
Man, it is my pleasure. I'm just going through, I don't know why I haven't done this yet, but I am just making sure that my phone is on silent. So,
that's okay. That's a good idea right there. I'm doing the same thing, with mine.
I didn't even think about it, which I never turn it on, but inevitably when it does have volume on, something's being recorded. So it's just one of those things. That's how they work. So
I know exactly what you're talking about. People always call at the time when you don't need them to call the most. But man, we have got several points of contact, but I got to say this right off the bat. My favorite episode of Duck Dynasty ever is season 4, episode 2. It's when, you're going on a date and you're dating, and Uncle Si is going ballistic. And he said, I got two. He said, I know how to take out a woman, and I know how to take out the enemy. And in both cases, we're going to paint the town red. That's what he said. I'll never forget that. And he was singing, if you like a dish, you got to put a ring on it. That was hilarious, but I love the show. We're all, huge fans, but tell us a little bit about your story. About how did you get involved with the Robertsons, and how did this whole Duck Dynasty thing come about with you? We'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a funny deal. Looking back on it, it is 100% a God thing, because growing up in West Monroe, Louisiana, I was born and raised there, still live there, and now the general manager of the company. But growing up there, like Duck Commander was just kind of like a myth almost, like you knew of them, but you really didn't, because Phil, even back in those days, he's just like he is today. He kept to himself down on the riverbank. So unless you went to him, you don't see Phil Robertson out grocery shopping, or he had Miss K for that. And
right.
So it was always kind of a deal where it's like, oh man, they live 20 minutes from me, but I've never met them, and this, that, the other. But during college, I was working at a local sporting goods store there in town, and Willie had, he took over the company while I was working there. So like part of our deal is, we have gun sponsors and ammo sponsors and all that kind of deal. And so all of that stuff started being shipped through us, and I was the manager of the gun department. So naturally met Willie, trying to help him out, just make his life a lot easier. And we became friends through that process and started playing golf together, playing cards together, pretty much doing anything together. And, it just, it grew from there. And then when I was in graduate school, I had quit working at the sporting goods store because my graduate research and all was taking up all my time, and they were paying me to go to school. So like, I didn't need a job per se. Like I was making enough from that to justify not having to work, where I could fly through graduate school. I wasn't trying to be a career student. And And so during that, when I was writing my thesis, I just called Willie and said, "Hey man, you got anything I can do? I need something to like just," I said, "I need some mind numbing labor. Like
Yeah.
these numbers are killing me. Writing this thesis is killing me. I just need a place I can go and like zone out and do something completely different." And and I told him, I said, "You ain't got to pay me. Like, I don't, I'm not asking you for this for money. Like
Right.
I should pay you if you have something I can do to get this stuff out of my head." Like, and so he said, "Wait, you know, him being the businessman he is, he's like, you'll work for free?" And I was like, uh, "Yeah, I mean, that's cool, whatever." So I started there. And then about probably 2 or 3 months into it, I had a decision to make to either finish graduate school or start working at Duck Commander full time. And I chose and thought and prayed and did all the things, and I made that leap to go do something that I had no idea what it was going to entail. Up until that point, my life had been somewhat planned out, and when I did it, man, my life changed for the better. I made that decision. When I started at Duck Commander, I'll say this: like, we were holding paychecks, like,
Mm.
waiting on orders to come in, or like the checks from the orders on big box terms. I mean, there's sometimes net 30 or net 60, and we wouldn't have the money for payroll
Right.
when I started there. So, um, the original crew, as I call them, you really worked out of a passion for doing something like that, because it was not about the money,
Mm.
because there was none. And and that's as recent as 12 years ago. I mean, so we're saying, because it was a
Wow. Yeah.
extremely seasonal business. We made money from August till January, and that's it. The
That's
rest of
it.
the time, money was leaving the door.
Right. Yeah.
So, but to see where it got to, at that time too, we had started a show on the Outdoor Channel called Benelli Presents Duck Commander,
Mm.
that was kind of like Duck Dynasty, but it still had hunting in it.
Mm.
And a production company from LA reached out. I'll never forget getting the email. They sent an email to information@duckcommander.com, which I got all those emails. And I read it, I kind of chuckled. They're like, "Hey man, we've seen your show. We love it. We think we can take it mainstream." And I'm like, "Yeah, right, whatever." But when you see those, I passed it on to Willie, and we kind of laughed about it. And he said, "But reach out and see what they say. See if they're legit. See if it's just a fan, like like
Yeah.
whatever. Figure out what it is." And so I reached out to them. And they said, "Hey, we're gonna fly out and have a meeting. Let's just look at this. Let's see what it looks like." And I was like, "Huh." So they flew out. We all sat down and talked and had the meeting. And then they said, never forget, they said, "But here's the catch. We don't want any hunting." And we were like, but, but that's what we do. Like,
Yeah.
if we don't hunt, then what skill set do we bring to this? Like, what,
Yeah.
in our mind, we were hunters.
Right.
We weren't comedians, or whatever you want to
Right.
call
Yeah.
us. We weren't sitcom-esque kind of people. We were just hunters. We
Right.
got a sense of humor, but we didn't think nothing of it. And I'll never forget, Phil got up out of his chair. He said, "Yeah, this ought to work." And he just walked out. Uh, but we met after they left as a family, as a company. And I'll never forget, Phil was the one that said it. Phil said, "Look," he said, "if we can change one person's life
Mm.
from doing this, if we can get one person to Jesus from taking this chance and doing this show on a different network and without the hunting, then," he said, "then we'd be foolish not to."
Wow.
And, from that point on, we basically put all hands in and said, "Let's roll." And, it started. I'll never forget, we shot 2 episodes, 2 pilot episodes. And whenever we shot those, they went back, edited them, put them together. Um, and then A&E ordered 13 more off the rip. And that was the largest order they had ever made for a
Wow.
TV show.
Yeah.
So they saw something in us
Yeah.
that we didn't even know about ourselves. And you could say they saw something in us, but again, I go back to it all being a God thing.
Yeah.
The good Lord said, wait, these boys actually I'm about to give them a platform to share Jesus, not with the hunting community, but with the world. And we did. And if you look back at the episodes, all this information is public knowledge, and you can Google it, you can search it and all that. And the first time on the family prayer, if you go back and watch the first couple of seasons, they never left in Jesus' name in there. And that's how we close every prayer, right?
Yeah.
They had never done that. And when they did, our ratings went vertical. There was no slow climb anymore. It went straight up.
Jesus.
And man, that's cool. Like, that's just so you can believe in coincidence, you can believe in whatever you want to. But when they finally did that, the show just boom, and we were rock stars, if you want to call it that. We were, so it's a cool thing, man. And to look back on it, and during the deal, you're so busy, and I can't explain how busy we were during that deal. Like, the part that nobody sees is to do a show like that was 40 to 50 hours a week of filming.
Wow.
For 22 minutes.
Wow.
For 22 minutes of TV.
Wow.
Because in their world, unlike the Outdoor Channel world, we had to match lighting, everything. So like, if a cloud rolls over during the middle of filming and you're outside, you got to stop.
Wow.
And let the cloud go. So it's a lot of, I called it was the longest work days where we did nothing. Like, you would sit there and you had to wait on everything. Then you ran and did it real quick. And then you sat back down and waited for that to happen again. It was just which really was, it wasn't hard work, but it was time consuming. And it took a lot of time away from you and your family. Even though most of them got to work with their family, but we rarely got to work where all the family members were together at one time. So you were missing time with kids and brothers and the job and everything else. So it was a lot of work, but Jesus said it's not going to be easy. That's right. I mean, nothing about this is easy, but you run the race, you keep the faith, and you get the reward. And our reward so far has been fame, if you want to be. The famous part, I tell everybody, I said the famous part we got down. Right. It's the fortune part we're all still waiting to come in. But the same deal. Our treasures aren't stored here. Our treasures are stored in heaven. So it's been a fun ride, and it still is, because now we have the Duck Call Room podcast, which is doing really good, and Jace and them just released a new show on Fox Nation. So I mean, we still get to have a lot of fun. I still get to duck hunt for a living. I still get to run around with a bunch of these crazy fishermen that have become friends through the years. And it's a good time, man. It's the Lord God is good. He's always been good, even when I didn't deserve it. And not saying that you ever deserve it, but especially when I was giving him every reason to burn me, he didn't. So it's been awesome.
Man, that's awesome. Hey, Justin, we're going to pause right here. I'm going to do something, because I know what's going to happen. I forgot to take the wire out of the camera, and I know what's going to happen right here. So just hold 1 second. Man, that is so awesome. I tell you what, learning the behind the scenes and all that's golden. That's gold. Everybody's going to love that. That's an awesome deal. Well, you mentioned that we know some professional fishermen. We actually have several people that are kind of in common. The first being the guy who set this thing up is Ott Defo. And we're going to talk about, how did you meet Ott Defo? What's the story there?
So actually, Otter, the first person I met of Ott's family was actually his wife. And his kid. They Jenny and the kids had a booth at the Knoxville Classic.
Right.
And they were selling Ott t-shirts. And I was working for Realtree, and the booths just happened to be really close to each other. And I went over and bought a t-shirt for my wife, because my wife is a huge Ott fan.
Right. Yeah.
She's a Tennessee girl.
Yeah.
Otter being, Tennessee's child, basically, when it comes to bass fishing. There was just kind of that natural, affinity to gravitate towards Ott for her. And I didn't really know much about Ott other than what I'd seen him fishing on Major League Fishing and some of that stuff. And he seemed like a really good guy.
Right.
So I went and bought a shirt from Jenny and the kids. And from that point on, like, we were backstage at the weigh-in, because I've been friends with Jacob Wheeler. We've been friends since we both worked together at Under Armour. So I tell everybody I knew him before he was anybody.
Yeah, before he was famous. Yeah.
And backstage, talking to him, standing there, Brittany was wearing her Ott shirt, and Ott come over and introduced himself, said he was a fan of the show and what we stood for. So, just naturally, another one of those God things. Just two believers getting together, shaking hands, and it's the same deal. You never know where that stuff may lead. And now Ott's getting into hunting, so I'm helping him out, trying to help him with turkeys and ducks and all that kind of stuff. And I love it.
I got to tell you. So one year, I and Andy Montgomery and I, we would room together a lot at the Bassmaster events when they were on the Bassmaster tour. And of course I was a chaplain, and they were always at my meetings. I knew Ott was always going to be there. I knew Andy, Edwin Evers, Shaw Grigsby, and those guys are always going to be there. But so we're at New York, where I'm going Monday. And Andy didn't make the cut, and he says, "Well, Chris, what are we going to do?" And I was like, "Well, we can go fishing." And he goes, "That ain't going to happen, because Andy does not fish for fun. He doesn't do it. Ott does. Andy doesn't." And so we decided to go out and just look at the deer, because in New York, there are deer everywhere. I mean, we're just around, and Ott's in the back seat, and he is just kind of doing like that, because he cares nothing about hunting. At the time, he was absolutely. And then all of a sudden, I interviewed him on a podcast. I was like, "What in the world happened to you?" And he was like, "Dude, when I got converted, I got converted." I mean, it's just, and he has gone all out. He is turkey, deer crazy now. And I can't believe that. That's just unbelievable. But what a night. I mean, there are some guys in the fishing world that they have kind of a persona, and they kind of step into that persona every time. Ott Defo is the same everywhere he goes. What you see on camera is exactly the way he is. And he is one of the most genuine guys I've ever met in my life. It's just awesome.
I couldn't agree more. And a lot of those guys are, man.
Yeah.
I've been lucky enough to be around a lot of them now and spend a lot of time with a lot of those guys. And, it's just really cool. For me, growing up, and when people ask, they're like, "If you had to pick one, fishing or hunting, what would it be?" And I'm like, fishing.
Yeah.
110%, because they don't tell me when I can and can't fish. They restrict me on hunting. They're like, "Hey, you got 60 days, buddy, get it done."
I'm going to send you a t-shirt. I got a t-shirt that says "Jesus hung out with fishermen, not golfers."
Yeah.
So that's going to be, I had to get you one of those deals.
So, fishing was always, my first love of the outdoors. My grandparents took me fishing every chance, every time I asked. If I had my stuff done, they would take me fishing. And, it's always been my first love. But, I just enjoy it. And I enjoy spending time with these guys, because what you do when you go fishing, and same with hunting, but especially fishing, there's generally only two people on a boat.
Yeah.
So you got a little captive audience for a little while, so you can figure out what these guys are made of. And on the off chance that they don't believe or haven't ever had that, you get to share Jesus with them.
Right.
And it's a cool thing. And to see these guys, like I said, prime example, Jacob Wheeler. I knew Jacob when he was single. I knew him when he was dating his wife, Alicia. I now continue to know him and call him one of my best friends, that he's married and has 2 kids. So I've got to see him grow and mature and all of that. And it's been, and the same for him. I mean, when we first started being friends, I wasn't married. I didn't have, so,
Right.
and now he sees me in the same stages and we're about to have twins. And
Yeah.
so it's been,
Congratulations.
it's just
Wow.
been kind of a cool, there's just, man, life is wild, right? I
It
mean,
is. It really is.
it's wild, and I love spending time with these guys. I just got done spending a day on the river in a jet boat with Jacob and Andy Morgan,
Oh,
and
wow. Yeah.
yeah,
You talk
and
about heavy hitters. Those guys,
yeah,
I
try.
was on a boat with Clifford Perch and Mark Kyle recently, and they were catching. They're like, Chris, it's time for you to catch one. I'm like, dude, I'm fishing behind 2 vacuum cleaners. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and they even let me go down that river. I was in the back of the boat, but I was technically in the front, and I got first crack at them, and they still strapped me. So,
oh yeah.
it was, but it's so cool, man. It's so cool. I tell everybody, it's so cool to watch a professional be a professional,
Yeah,
no matter what their craft is.
exactly.
It is so cool to sit there and watch those two guys, and I'm like, man, that's awesome.
That really, what's your favorite way to catch a bass, man? What's your go-to? If you can
I'm
catch
a,
one anyway, what do you like?
I guess it's a Louisiana in me. I like to dob them up. I like flipping. I like
Yeah.
getting in shallow water around some wood and putting a jig or a little creature bait in my hand and going and
Okay, Darbone. What's your tip on Darbone? How do you catch them there?
go somewhere else.
I love it, man. I love it. I got a buddy down in Minden, Louisiana, and we go on that little Dorcheat River a lot of
Yeah.
times. And man, that's a great little place. I shouldn't have said that on the podcast because tens and tens of people are listening and they're going to go rush Minden right now. But we went down there a couple of years ago. Man, there's really Louisiana is just loaded with great fishing areas, and and it's people don't know this, but it's very similar to a lot of the lakes in South Carolina. South Carolina has a big swampy feel,
Yeah.
to it as well. And so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I love fishing in Louisiana and I love the shallow water stuff, but it is cool like every year to go spend a week on the Tennessee River
Yeah.
and stuff, because that is stuff we don't get to do. Like
Yeah.
our fish aren't current related. They don't. So I really get to go get like a week crash course and all that kind of offshore fishing stuff, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. I'd rather beat my head against a wall than
Yeah.
sit out there in the middle of the pond.
I know.
I like up
I
on the
know.
bank moving.
I do too.
But
I do too.
but it is a lot of fun. And when you go with these guys, they flat know how to catch them out there in the middle. So
Yeah.
it's a really cool experience. But yeah, I think it's just one of them old habits die hard. Put me up next to the bank with a flipping stick, and I'm as happy as a pig in slop.
Man, that's awesome right there. Well, let me tell you this. Now we got another connection that you don't know about. A number of years ago, one of the things that I do is I try to build relationships with bass pros. Like when I try to marshal, I try to do some stuff. But we were heading out to California, and so I offered to drive. I put together a team of guys, and we drove some pros boats all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast. But one of the things we did was we stopped in Las Vegas on the way there to go to the Duck Dynasty Broadway show in there because, we all love Duck Dynasty, but my buddy Tad Wilson was playing Phil Robertson. And so Tad and I, we worked at a Christian camp together for years, as when we were in college. And so it was just like, it was awesome. I mean, Tad brought us in and we got front row seats to see Duck Dynasty, the musical. And it was awesome, man. So Tad Wilson, is a good buddy of mine, and man, he loves it. He was a good Phil Robertson. I like
that was another wild thing, man, was the people that wanted to do the musical. You're like, wait, what? And then so we got to go out like before it opened and watch it, in Vegas. And I was like, man, like whoever would have thought we were here,
I know, man. It was
was
so well done too. I think y'all should have taken that thing to Branson, Missouri. I think in Branson, Missouri, it would still be running right now. In Branson,
I
Missouri.
said the same thing. I said, Vegas is cool and all, and it kind of gives you that splash and that scene. But I was like, I think this thing would kill it in Branson or even like Gatlinburg or
Gatlinburg, Gatlinburg, Branson, like that. Yeah, that
somewhere
it would
like
still
that.
be going.
So,
yeah.
So
that was awesome. That was a great experience with getting a chance to get out there with Tad and seeing Tad play Phil. I was like, Tad's playing Phil Robertson. I was like, I can't believe this. This is awesome. It was super stuff. Well, man, Faith is the cornerstone of what you do. Now, you and I do a lot. I mean, this is my other connection with you is we speak at a lot of wild game banquets.
Mhm.
And, you know, a number of years ago, I talked with this with my guest, Glenn Chapelier recently, really kind of 94, 95 is when we started seeing that sportsmen's banquets were almost taking the place of like old timey revivals, that guys that would never darken the doors of a church would come to a wild game banquet or come to a sportsman's banquet and get a chance to hear the gospel, you know, in places that they would never, ever normally come. So you're a man of faith. Tell us about how you came to faith in Jesus. What's your story?
My story is so funny because I do this at all of my wild game. I always say it's pretty boring, right? Like in my mind. But then you have to remember it's not your story anyways.
Right.
That my story is not the one being told.
Yeah.
The story of Jesus is the one being told. And that one is pretty daggum exciting.
Yeah.
But in my life, I was raised in church. My grandfather's was an Assembly of God minister. I was there every time doors open, right? Because my mom, I mean, they drugged me to church, and whether I was kicking and screaming, and but dadgummit, I was there, and you know, and I loved it. But the thing that I missed growing up in church was that personal relationship with Jesus, right? I did all the things. I memorized all the verses. Everything was a competition. I don't like losing.
Right.
Period. End of story at anything. So I was trying to beat everybody in Sunday school. I was trying to, you know, I was straight A's all the way through. Everything in my life was competitive in that regard. And but throughout that, I did not. I just didn't. I missed it. You know, I missed what I was supposed to be there for.
Right.
And I can say that now. At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. You know, but I had missed it. And then you get through high school and you go into college, and you see some things in the world that, you know, for a guy that was grown up like that, maybe hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
You know, and you start doing things and trying things and basically just being rank heathen is what I like to call it. Looking back on it now, even still, I had a lot of people I was around that were a lot worse off than me, but still, you say that, but all sin is sin. And it's all a death sentence, right? I mean, it separates us from the love of Christ. And so it doesn't matter what your sin is, it's all counted the same. And you know, I did all that. And then that's why I was saying earlier, the job at Duck Commander was such a godsend, because I started working at Duck Commander. I was in sales at first. Then we got an order from Gander Mountain for like 6,000 duck calls, and they needed it in 72 hours.
Wow.
And it was kind of a weird deal. And I called Jace down there and I was like, hey man, I got, you know, as a good salesman, of course, what do you say when you get that order? Absolutely. We'll have it to you. No problem. In the meantime, I'm like, we ain't got this. Like, but dadgummit, I'm gonna figure out how to do it. And so I called Jace, and he just hung up on me. And he went, ha, and hung up. And then I called him again. He hung up. So Willie told me, he said, just get in your truck and drive down there and go talk to him, tell him what it's about. So I did. And Jace was like, well, we can't get it done. I said, well, I'll help you, you know, like, let me help. And he said, can you even blow a duck call? And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I can. He's like, well, I ain't ever heard you. And I said, well, I'm hunting with you guys. Why would I? Like, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he put one together, threw it to me. I blew it. And he said, sit down. And from that moment on, I was in the duck call room, right?
Wow.
So now I'm sitting in the duck call room. And I'm working with these guys. I'm working with Jace. I'm working with Goblin. I'm working with Cy, side by side, shoulder to shoulder every day. And I just start looking, man. And I'm like, man, how are these guys? You just start noticing things. Not once did they ever hit me over the head with a Bible. I knew what they, you know, I knew what they stood for. I knew what it was and all this, but I'm looking at these guys. They're not stressed over money. They're not stressed about life. They never have a bad day. They always have a smile on their face. And I'm like, and me coming in, I'm coming in, I may have a headache and
Right. Yeah.
self-induced headache. And,
Yeah.
and I'm just sitting there trying to figure out like, man, what is it with these guys? So the biologist in me starts being super analytical. Like,
Mm.
okay, let's start checking boxes. We work the same place. We do the same thing. We make roughly the same money. We do this, do that, do this. And I came down to the only difference I could find was they had that relationship with Jesus that I didn't have.
Wow. Yeah.
And of course, being not having that relationship, when you make that realization, first thing you say is, that can't be it. Let me go back through my list, right? Because that's a moment of like, self-reflection where you're like, you're putting the blame all on you. And for a man, that's hard to do,
Yeah,
or
it
for
is.
a
Yeah.
human, period.
Yeah.
So I started my list over, and then I came back to the same deal. And I was like, man, whatever. Okay, fine. I'm going to give up. And so I told Jace, I'll never forget it. I told him, I said, Jace, I need to learn more about Jesus, like what y'all got here. And he said, I'll never forget. He said, well, it's about time. And I was like, I said, so you was just going to let me sit over here and keep doing the things I was doing? And he said, well, let me just tell you what I've learned in sharing Jesus and being around people. He said, if I'd have brought it up to you, would you have listened? And I said, probably not.
Yeah.
And he said, that's what I'm talking about. He said, I knew that if we just kept living our life the way we were doing it, we would get to you eventually.
Right. Yeah.
He said, and so I said, all right, well, I'm here, man. What do we need to do? And he said, well, first thing you need to do is you need to go home and read the book of John. And he said, and I want you to read it twice. And I said, okay, that's cool. Thinking back on the Bible, I'm like, why ain't we starting in Genesis?
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah. And I'm like, so I asked him, I was like, why John? And he said, well, in his opinion, he said, that is the most, that's the closest look at Jesus's life while he was here on earth.
Yeah. Especially for Gentiles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I did, and we started talking, and then we started, going through the Bible, and we just had a Bible study basically every other day in the duck call room. We'd get there a little early, we'd study some things, and him and Godwin and Si all invested time in me. And that was really cool. And I'll never forget Mother's Day of 2011. I was headstrong in it, right? I needed to know more about Jesus. But Mother's Day comes around. And so I had started going to church with those guys. I had left my grandfather's church mainly because, I'd been there for 20 something years.
Right. Yeah.
And I just needed something fresh, right?
Yeah.
I think the worst thing a lot of people can do in their walk is to go somewhere where they're super comfortable, because I think that comfort a lot of times breeds complacency. So, I'll go visit a lot of different places throughout the year, especially now.
Right.
But it's Mother's Day, and I knew it would mean a lot to my mom if I went and I went to church with him. I went to my grandfather's church, and like I said, he was an Assembly of God minister. But on that day, it was so weird. I was sitting there, I'm not listening to a word he's saying, right? I'm just studying. I got my Bible open. I'm studying. I'm reading in Acts, Acts 2, the day of Pentecost and all that kind of stuff. And, I get to it, and I think it's 38 and 39 where it says, repent and be baptized, for forgiveness of your sins, and, go make disciples of all the nations, all that kind of stuff. And when I'm reading that, I just hear something out of my ear, and I'm like, I look up, and on Mother's Day of all days, my grandfather's making a baptistry call. Like, which, if you know Assembly of God, that's not a huge part of their ministry, right? Like, I mean, it is, but it's not.
Right.
It's not a every Sunday thing like it is in a lot of other deals.
Yeah.
And I look up and I'm like, huh? And then I look back down, it says repent and be baptized. And I look up again and I'm like, oh, he's talking to me.
Yeah.
So I went up, got baptized, and from that day forward, I proclaim Jesus everywhere I go. Am I perfect? No. Do I have the gift of God's grace and mercy? Yes. you know, but do I try to be perfect? Absolutely. I strive to be the
Right.
best I can be
Yeah.
every day. And fall short a lot of times, just like a lot of people, but it's not the key to this walk is how you respond and how you
Mm,
get up and how you keep moving, not how straight of a line you can walk.
right. Yeah.
You know, because we're all gonna fail. Um, and so, you know, from I tell everybody, I said that was the best night's sleep I have ever gotten in my life.
Wow.
Because
Yeah.
for the first time in my life, I did not care if I woke up.
Yeah. You knew where you were
Um,
going.
I
Yeah.
knew where I was going. I knew
Yeah.
that I was assured of heaven. And man, when you start living life like that, when you start living life where you don't care if you wake up because you know the end game is better than where
Right.
you are
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
it frees you up to do a lot of things you probably wouldn't normally do. Um, and some people will hear that and say, "Oh, that frees you up." No, no. What I'm saying is, it frees me up to take those chances
Right. Yeah.
to share with somebody that I would normally probably just kind of sit back and would never do it. But now I get a chance to share with that. And now being crowding 37 years old, I'm about to have twins, and my next greatest job is right before me.
Yeah.
Like now
Yeah.
I have the job to guide these two children to heaven with me.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, that's going to be a really cool thing. It's going to be something I tell everybody. I was like, well, I've always said this, and it's going to ring true even more now. There's two things everybody sucks at, and that's marriage and it's marriage and parenthood, because you've never been either.
That's
Uh,
right. Yeah.
and you just have to
Yeah.
kind of get in it and figure it out. But we have the greatest coach and the greatest playbook ever written if we'll
Yeah.
just use it,
If we
you know.
just open up the Bible and
Yep.
let God speak. You know, I tell people the Bible's unlike any other book that's ever been written. You know, nobody ever reads the Twilight series and thinks they need to become a vampire.
Yeah.
But countless, you know, thousands of people all over throughout history have read the Bible and they're like, man, it was like it was speaking to me. And that's because it's the primary way God chooses to speak to our hearts, and it's truth, and it reveals the truth, you know, the way, the truth, and the life, you know, through
Amen.
Jesus. And so, and that's what
Yeah.
we
I
proclaim.
refer to it. I refer to it as not a rule book,
Yeah.
but it is it's a weapon of mass instruction.
Ooh, that's good, man. I love that. I'm going to put
And
that. That's going to be the tagline for this whole deal: a weapon of mass instruction. Yeah, that's awesome. That is
and it's
awesome.
just it's a love letter when you get right down
Yeah,
to it, man. So it's
it is. It
you know,
really
it's a
is.
really cool thing. And
Man, I appreciate you sharing that with me, and I appreciate your willingness to go wherever people call you to come and be a part of their game banquets and
oh,
things like
love
that.
them.
Can they contact you at duckcommander.com? I mean, is that you know how they can get in touch with you to
Yeah, so we have a deal there. It's booking at
yeah,
duckcommander.com. And then also I have a separate email on all my Instagram accounts and Facebook that they can use if they're interested in that. We do a lot of them as a group every year. I have one in a few weeks
right,
down in Pensacola, Florida.
yeah,
So that's going to be a cool one. Doing it with Godwin
yeah,
and David Blanton and Michael Waddell. So we're doing a big hunters night out kind of a deal. But it's going to be around sharing the gospel of Jesus to people that normally probably A, wouldn't come to this setting, and B, may never darken the doors of it. So
yeah,
you know, throughout this whole deal, I love getting emails back from the places that I go saying, you know, we had 10 people come to Christ, and you know, this, that, and it's just so cool, man. I tell
that is.
everybody, like, I want heaven full. Like,
That's right.
he's up
Yeah,
there building mansions and rooms. Let's
that's
keep him
right.
working.
Yeah,
Let's keep that construction room going, that
that's
construction
exactly
crew
right.
going.
That's
Because I
exactly right.
mean, it's the same deal. Can't you see it now? There's ducks everywhere.
Yeah, ducks
There's fish
everywhere,
everywhere. Like, and they always bite. And there ain't a game warden in sight.
man.
Not
I
one
tell
of
you,
them.
that's awesome. I always say there's a river. There's a river in heaven, and so
Amen.
that's the
They
place
talk
to be.
about it
I tell you.
often.
That's what I told my wife. You know, my wife passed away about 2 months ago, and excuse me, but I told her I'm going to meet you at the river, and we're gonna meet at the river, and so I'm very excited that God's using you in such a powerful way. That's cool. Well, listen, we come to the part of the show where I ask you to imitate a Bass Pro. Do you have a favorite Bass Pro you can do? Can you do Jacob Wheeler? Can you do Art Defoe? Can you give us a little, or whoever you want to do? I mean, we got, we've had tons of guys do imitations about him, and understand imitation's the highest form of flattery. So we're going to impersonation. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of one that I could actually do pretty good. Imitation is not a sk set that I really have per se, other than ducks.
Right. Yeah.
But that's using an instrument. If I was really going to imitate Odd, I'd have to take my shoes off.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. I don't know what it is about him. And what's funny is he's like best buddies with Andy Montgomery. And there are two things that Andy is afraid of. One is a pickle, and the other one is a man's feet. Those are the two things that he did. And I was like, one time I put a pickle on his toe and tried to chase him around the house one time with it. So I didn't like,
I really enjoy Andy too. I enjoy anybody that refers to themselves in the third person. So
that's right.
Andrew. When he gets to talking about, come on, Andrew, and all Andrew.
That, Andrew.
Yeah, I get tickled. I sure enough get tickled. And, man, I can't even think of one that I could even remotely do. You do the Wheeler, you do ding. I mean, you do that stuff ding. That they do. Yeah. And then you hit the bell, him and DC and Mark and all those guys.
Wheeler wears that hat. I mean, Wheeler could be a rapper. I mean, you ever notice that? He's got that hat. He wears that flat billed hat better than anybody I've seen. I mean, he's just he's out there.
And at the same time, he'll throw on camouflage and a curve bill hat. He's he doesn't box himself into one wardrobe or one look. So
that guy is a fish catching machine. And it's just there's no getting around that Wheeler is amazing. I think you could drop Wheeler off in a mud hole and he would catch a bass out of there. And it's a stunning.
Yeah, he was the only person I know that we stopped at a place in North Arkansas, public pond, basically in a park, and he catches an 8-pounder.
Man, I tell you what, that dude, he can do it anywhere, anytime. He's a threat to win any tournament. I hope to have him on my podcast real soon. He's a busy guy, though. He's a lot of stuff going on.
He is, and man, just thankful for his walk too, and seeing him mature in the faith.
That is good. And I'm glad that Wheeler's coming along and, growing in Christ. And that's what it is. It's when you start a relationship with Christ, that's just a beginning.
Yeah.
And then we, and Paul says, we need to grow up in our faith. We need to put away childish thinking, grow up in our faith. And it's always, and we never reach, total maturity till we go to be with Christ. But man, it's so cool to see people move into that realm of growth and where God can use them in ways that you never thought possible.
Yeah, I love that first part of James when he talks about that, where your perseverance, the perseverance leads to maturity, and maturity to all things, where then you can share and grow the kingdom. And it's just, man, when he says consider it pure joy when facing many trials, I'm like, have you ever just been going through one of the worst times of your life and thought, man, I should be happy?
Yeah.
But that's what he's saying. Like, consider that pure joy, because you know what that's forging in you. Like, don't worry about the right now. Worry about what's to come. And that's, a thing, my story is like I said, my personal story getting to Christ is overall pretty boring, right? I mean, in the grand scheme of things. But there could be somebody that is going through that exact same thing, that thinks their story is not worth sharing or not worth having. And if I can get that person to step out and share that quote unquote boring story with another person, then my job has been done.
That's exactly right.
And no matter what our story is, it's worth sharing, because at the end of the day, we're sharing Jesus's story.
That's exactly right. People always tell me, they say, man, I don't have a great testimony. Let me tell you, if you've got a testimony, it is a great testimony. I mean, whether some people's testimonies are more dramatic. Some people came from a lot further from things, but like you said, we're all sinners. We all fall short of the glory of God. And by his mercy, he calls to us. we repent of our sin and trust him. It's a free gift that he gives to us. It's nothing you can earn. It's nothing you can do. There's nothing, you can merit to get there on your own. He reaches out to us. We receive his mercy and grace, and he gives us eternal life and abundant life. And that's what is so awesome about following Christ. Let me tell you something, folks. If you're here today and you're listening to the podcast and you've never received Christ into your life, at the end of this podcast, I'm going to tell you exactly how you can do that in your life. And we would love to hear from you. If you do, you can contact us at basschaplain.com. And we would love to hear from you. It's actually basschaplain@gmail.com is what we'll be putting up. But man, Justin, it has been awesome, man. I tell you, I feel like I could talk to you all day, and I hope that you'll keep in touch with us. And listen, anytime you want to go bass fishing. Now, I tell everybody, they always ask me, man, it must be nice to be hanging out with them bass pros and get to fish all the time. I said, there's a reason I'm the chaplain and not on the tour, because I'm not that good of a bass fisherman. But I would love, to take you out, and anytime you want to go, and we'll get together and maybe catch a few and flip a few up. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I think the one thing everybody confuses is that, like, if I go fishing for bass, I don't care what bites that cricket. As long as it'll go yonder way,
yeah,
and I can go this way, we good. Like, I just like catching fish, and it's just something about the unknown of what's under that water and what's on the other end that gets me every time. And man, I love it. And I think there is a reason that Jesus hung out with fishermen.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I'm sending you a t-shirt, man. You're going to get the t-shirt. So.
And the first thing when he come back, he said, y'all got any of that fish?
That's right.
Now, of course, I'm going and I'm paraphrasing here.
Right.
But that means we're going to eat fish in heaven.
We'll go eat fish in heaven.
He come back and he said, y'all got any of that fish? And I was like, yeah, okay, I can run with this fella.
That's good. Exactly. That's exactly right. Jesus ate fish. That's a good deal. Well, man, thank you for being here as our guest on our podcast today. It has been an incredible experience for me. I love it. Hope you'll come back on again. Maybe we can get you and Ott on at the same time. And that'd be a great deal. Maybe we'll get you, Ott, and Andy on at the same time. And that would be a show really worth seeing right there.
That's going to have to be a mini series with us.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. The Bass Chaplain mini series. It's really cool. Well, folks, that wraps up today's podcast. You've been listening to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. We will see you next time.